So in the meanwhile, I would like to thank you, Peter, for the invitation. It's really brave to invite Lithic specialists because Lithic is always boring for lots of people. So I will try to make it not too boring today. And when Peter asked me my title, I sent something very wide. So now you will see that I will only take a few examples to introduce you to what we can do basically with Lithics. So no surprise, and I guess everyone here and beyond the screen knows the Neolithization of Europe and these two main waves. So I will focus here on the green, so on the Danubian waves of Neolithization in Europe. And I will especially focus on three small case studies that I selected around some recent publications that we did with some colleagues, like that the results are already published, so you can have a look then after this presentation if you are interested. So a first case study will be the Czech Republic, because, okay, I did a postdoc position there for 2 years, so now we are trying a little bit to publish the data and so on. So here I will take two examples. So the recent published site of Hryzov that we did with Dan is here, and some result about Tišetice that is excavated by Masaryk University. And here the idea will be to work a little bit to present you what we can do about waste management, village organization, activities, and identity of these Danubian nappers. Then I will go to Middle Belgium for something a little bit fast, probably. Let's see how long I will take for all the stuff. And here I will compare the western area of Belgium, which is called Hainaut region, and the eastern part of Belgium, which is called Hesbaye region. And the idea is to show you how to work on the transition between the LBK and the post-LBK, that is called Blicky-Villeneuve-Saint-Germain in this area, and what we can say with the lithics and what are the patterns of this transition. And to finish, I will say a few words about circulation networks, focusing on this Blicky-Villeneuve-Saint-Germain culture, so it's the post-LBK of northern France and Belgium, and to see what we can say about the circulation thanks to lithics. So this is the program of this short presentation. But first, I would like just introduce you a little bit of in the method that I am using to analyze these lithic industries. And it's based on the chain opératoire approach, what was developed in France and what we are using a lot for lithics, pottery, and stuff like that. So it's like a qualitative approach, basically, and this is sometimes quite complicated to discuss. I'm thinking about my German colleagues right now, which I'm working a lot with them, and they have completely different approaches. So sometimes it's quite complicated to discuss and to try to match the different observations that we can make or put in a database. So here I'm working essentially on these steps here in the chain opératoire. So the chain opératoire is to restitute all the stages from the selection of the raw material to the discard at the end of the tools in the villages, especially in the LBK villages. We are more and more specialized. This is very true for France. When I'm seeing that, I'm seeing that it's not exactly the same in the Czech Republic. But so now we are even disconnecting the raw material characterization, which is a specialty of my petroarchaeologist colleagues. So they are now working a lot at the microscopic scale to distinguish the different raw material and to characterize them. So we are relying on their work to better characterize the raw material as me technologists. So we have to collaborate. Here in the Czech Republic, you have lots of chance because I'm very sorry, I'm really bad to pronounce his name, but Antonin Prischistal is amazing. He did an amazing work with this book. So basically everything is almost solved for the Czech Republic. So it's quite easy to work with the raw materials, but it's not the same in all the country. And when you are putting your feet in Belgium, it's like a terrible mess and there are plenty of work to do still. And to determine the use of the tools, we have to collaborate with the use-ware analysis because I'm not doing the use-ware analysis. So if you want to have really all the chain opératoire, you have to collaborate with the petroarchaeologist and with the use-wear analysis. Unfortunately, in France, this is a really rare specialty right now, and it's really difficult to find people who are working on use-wear analysis. So today, I will mostly focus on that. And so the idea is to understand how all these small pieces that you are finding during the excavation, how are they produced, from which stage of the chain opératoire they are coming from. So in the best case, you are making puzzles. I don't know if I can say that in English, puzzles. So that's really amazing. Poof, everything is refitting like that. So you can really understand very well the chain opératoire when it's like that. But to be honest, it's almost never happening in the true life, unless you are working on workshops or stuff like that. So we have to play with what we call the mental refitting. So it means that you are making diacritical sketch like that. So you are finding the sense, the order of all the negatives to understand the chronology in between all the negative on one pieces. And you are doing that on all the pieces and then trying to see what is matching and not to restitute all the succession of this gesture. So it's what we are calling method. The method, we are trying to determine the method. And we can refine a little bit the description of this method by injecting some information about what we call techniques. And techniques, it's like the tools and the gesture you are employing to snap exactly the blade. So it means like indirect percussion, direct percussion, pressure, and so on and so forth. But we don't have any data to compare because in ethnoarchaeology, for example, there is no flint knapper. So we have to rely on experimental data. And I have to admit that this is a limit because, of course, lots of stuff have been done to determine the techniques. And I'm in a lab where you have like a huge library. You can open some tiroir, I don't know how to say that in English. You can open some stuff and then to look precisely at the experimental collection and so on. But this experimental collection was built on one saw the experimenters. So Jacques Pellegrin, for example, he didn't study LBK. So like create experimental data that are not really fitting our archaeological material. So now we are trying to increase a little bit all this experimental data to have like a fully representation of all the techniques. And I will say a little word about Lithic because this is important sometimes in some specific case. So then when you understood all the chain opératoire, then you can replace all the small flakes, all the small pieces in the different stages of the chain opératoire you identify. And then you can quantify all the representation of the chain opératoire. So basically, you are creating what we call techno-economic diagrams, and it allows you to see, okay, here you have all the beginning of the chain opératoire, but not a lot of blade. But all the chain opératoire is representing on the side, so you know they arrive with the blocks, like fully blocks, raw blocks, and they nap everything, and they probably leave the site with some blades to bring them somewhere else. So it's a really useful tool. Of course, you have to discuss the context before because you can't do that in like, I don't know, a pedestrian prospection to use an example, which is like the extreme. But you have to discuss, of course, the context to apply this kind of element. And this is really nice to restitute the circulation networks to understand the connection between the different sites and if there are exchanges, some stuff, some blades or some blocks and so on and so forth. And then I'm now adding some stuff related to the identity of the nappers. So I'm working on what I'm calling like learning networks. So it means that people, you have to, it's not easy to nap. I don't know if some of you tried already, but it's not easy. And to succeed to obtain blades like that, regular blades, you have to be trained and it's in an intense training and so on and so forth. And you must have trained with some people. And the fact that your mentor is training you, he will teach you how he learned also. So you will do exactly the same. So when you are working with the communities of practice, basically you will have the same way of doing the things. So now I'm trying to distinguish it like different napping schools. That's basically what we can, in an easier way to describe it, is to distinguish different mapping schools. So with some very small variants in the chaîne opératoire that includes different gesture and tool. We can, in the best case also, when you are working at the level of the house, go a little bit deeper and even work on the individual scale to try to trace some nappers. Today, I didn't shoot this example, so I will not describe that. If in the discussion you want to discuss that, let's do that. So first area, the Czech Republic, and I will start so with a really recent publication that Dan Pillars conducted. It was really nice to work with Dan and very easy. So it was recently published, and it's a case study of like you have a small LBK site with 4 houses that are really visible. So this one is not fully excavated, but you have this pit which is related probably to a 4th house. So you see that like the pits are like seems to be connected with the house. So it was a really nice case study to try to see the waste management here. Regarding the lithics, everything or almost everything was concentrated only in this pit, in the pit 32, and you can see that almost no material was discovered in the other pits. This was quite strange. And if we are going now at the level of the tools, I think there is a slide just after, but it's like 150 artifacts that were discovered on this site, something like that. So it's quite a lot for the area. It was quite surprising. But when you are going to see if there are tools, but there are almost nothing. You see, there are only 16 tools on all the material. It's like 11% of the assemblages. It's almost nothing. And you see there are only 2 sickle blades. It's something which is completely atypical for the LBK sites. This house, nothing, no Lithic tools. It's really weird. And the blanks that were selected to create the tools are, you see, like blades for half of the blanks, and all the flakes that are selected are coming from the maintenance or the reuse of blade cores to like all the chaîne opératoire here is related to the blade or blade productions. And all the raw materials are involved here in the production of, in the toolkit. So all the raw materials seems to be treated the same. So what we have here in Lithic is quite strange. They are like, we have lithics that are mostly corresponding to waste of the production phase of the blade chain opératoire, almost no tools. If we are looking at the raw material, well, unfortunately, we have like, so you will believe me, it's 150 and something pieces. And in this area of Bohemia, there is no local raw materials. So they have to rely on outcrops that are located at 120 kilometers from the site. So it's really far away. But it's what we get in the majority here. You see this, again, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it, the Cyklus quartzite, which is like really dominant in the assemblages, but 120 kilometers, okay? And then you got a little bit of this SDS erratic flint that you can find like on these green lines. It's also very far away. You see, it's between this almost 100 kilometers, and you have this Polish crack of flint, Jurassic crack of flint, which is around 300 kilometers. So all the raw material are coming from a very long distance area. So we can question ourselves under which form this material is introduced on the site. So I did like what I presented before, a small techno-economic diagram. So with the shaping out and all the different categories here, we can discuss that later. But so you see here, it's a pit 32, the one which was like full of material. And this is the other house, okay? So all the material is concentrated here. And you can see here that the blocks must have been brought raw or pre-shaped on the site, but probably raw. So we have all the chain opératoire of this Trichine quartzite at 120 kilometers from the site. You see here, okay, in the pit, we are missing the beginning of the shaping out, but we can find it elsewhere on another pit. So there is a kind of complementarity between this pit and the material from here. And you can define with the quality or the colors and the inclusion of the raw material, different kind of blocks. We have some types, so there is around minimum 3 different types of blocks. When we saw the assembly at the very beginning, I was sure that it will be full of refitting. Not at all. And I tried, you know, I tried, but no refitting. So it looks like something very coherent. So we have all the chaîne opératoire, all the ways from the débitage, but with lots of missing part of the chaîne opératoire. So it's like it's a secondary deposit of a coherent napping episode or napping episodes. And as you can see, we have plenty of very, very, very tiny pieces. So they must have cleaned the napping place very deeply that we can succeed to have these small pieces, and it's not, we can't succeed to refit the stuff. So it's not a workshop. It's probably a secondary deposit of coherent napping episodes. If we are moving to the Krakow flint here, it's a little bit more complicated because là, you have the beginning of the chaîne opératoire, there is only one piece. And often when I have like a missing stage, so I'm considering that, okay, something is really missing in this assemblage and the cores are probably arriving like already pre-shaped, already ready for the débitage, and the débitage could always, could even have started already somewhere else. So they are bringing some cores like that in the process of débitage, but they can also bring like one blaze one blaze, one flake, like just to have that nice blend that you can also take with you like that. So here we can also play a little bit with the distinction of different blocks, and we can identify at least 6 different blocks with a very low number of artifacts, and the chaîne opératoire is very fragmented. So it's partly probably not locally. Again, everything is concentrating, most of the thing is concentrating in this pit 32. And there is a kind of complementarity again with this pit 9 and pit 32. You see that when it's missing here, it's here. So a little bit of local napping of this raw material that is like from 300 kilometers, but also probably they were bringing some already napped blade or flake. Here you have the SGS, but it's almost the same situation than the Krakow flint. So introduction, of course, in the process of débitage, you have the small cores here. You have a very low number of artifacts and a very fragmented chaîne opératoire. So it's exactly the same situation than from the Krakow flint with this raw material. When you are going to look a little bit at the entire pieces, you can see it's a small assembly, so we are very limited by the number of artifacts. But if you are never doing anything because it's too low, you can't do anything here in Bohemia. So it's qualitative. You are discussing it. It's not statistically relevant here, but you can still use them to discuss a little bit. You see that there are differences between the blade size and their regularity, especially one you can't see here, but the Scritchin quartzite, they're used to produce irregular blades, like huge irregular blades, and the production for the Krakow and the SGS is more regular and it's smaller bladelets. Then I'm playing a little bit with the preparation of detachment of the bladelet. And so it's divided here per raw material. And you can see, so here it's the description of the butts. And here it's the description of the preparation of the overhangs and the platform. So basically you can see that for the Scritchin quartzite, they are using flat platform. And usually with no preparation. It's also gone with the fact that it's irregular blade and so on and so forth, so not a lot of preparation. But it's quite fitting what we can see for the SGS, but here it's 2 pieces, so it's very difficult to say. On the contrary, with the Krakow flint, you can't see absolutely this line is like, there is not this way of preparing the bladelets, but it's completely different. We have like some kind of faceting of the platform and with some faceting also in the preparation. So there is at least two technical groups that are coexisting in the Hlisov village. This is just perhaps to open the discussion later, but when you are looking at this kind of production, for example, with this large frontal table, with very steep flanks here, it's very flat core. It's really small and very flat with an acute platform angle and a very local preparation to reduce the accuracy of the angle. In the literature, at least when we are searching for this kind of description, it's completely fitted the Neolithic tradition. But I'm just saying that, and we will go to the conclusion of this first thing, which is, okay, we have a very small LBK site here, which is located very far from the Lithic outcrops. We have a lack of tools, so I don't know, I'm imagining at least that they took the tools for another settlement when moving somewhere. But we have a local production, at least for the Sclesian quartet, it's obvious. And there is two technical groups that can be identified. There is an important concentration of the weight in this pit, so there is a centralization of the napping activity here. And this is questioning the organization of the activity. And I'm like quite surprised to which strategy that they are using to train the young nappers and to allow the good nappers to keep the skill if you are so far from the outcrops and then you have a year like not a lot of artifacts. And it's a lot compared to some sites where we only have 10 blades. So I'm really now thinking about how it's possible. So if there are some substitutes for lithics in this situation, or how to organize the apprenticeship. I think we can like develop some project about that because the distance of the outcrops and the fact that the raw material is like really lacking, but they not here. Voilà. So let's see in the future what we can say about that. So it was the first case here. And then we are moving to Moravia and the Tishetice settlement that is excavating the research project for the Masaryk University. So the students are excavating there. And so we are, oh, sorry, we are, ah ben non, mais c'est pas dans le bon sens. But it's not coming back. C'est bon. So it's just for you to wake up. No, it seems to be okay. Ouais. So now we are currently excavating this house, but so the excavation uncover more than 20 houses. So like I studied all the material from the different houses. We will stick here. So it's like 401 pieces for 20 houses. So it's not a lot also compared to what we saw to Hlisov, because it was only 4 houses and 150 pieces. So there are a huge difference between the houses. This is just for Peter to say that here we are considering that the material which is coming from the pits are related to the activity of the house. We are saying that because of some of the refitting with the lithics, which are like refitting on both sides of the house, so it's one argument. We are now currently working on ceramic refitting, and we are using the Tsar method developed by Sebastian Plutniak to try to understand if the filling of the pit is coherent or not, and how it works between the different houses. And we are also we base our work on the PhD thesis of Ivana Vostrovska. This is this is completely different here because you see that the raw material can be more available closer than Hlisov case, for example. So we have local to sublocal raw material that are available between 0 to 30 kilometers. So it's a Krumlovsky-less area here, and we have this KZD, so this weathering product of serpentine that are available here really close also. We have this Olomouciani church, which is like available between 30 to 80 kilometers here. And then again, you can find this exogenous raw material. So the same that we speak about before with this Krakow flint, the erratic silicite, the same thing here, and some of the radiolarite that you can find toward the south or here in Slovakia. Really quickly, when you are comparing the assemblages, so here it's we conducted some statistical analysis, but based on qualitative data. And you can see that in Krumlovsky-less, so the closest outcrop from the side, there is two varieties of this flint, some Krumlovsky-less 1 and Krumlovsky-less 2. And it seems that the selection of one or the other one could be related to the chronology. Like the domination of the Krumlovsky-less 2 seems to be associated with the early phase of occupation, and then there is a twist where they prefer to use the Krumlovsky-less 1 raw material. Furthermore, it seems that there is an opposition between when they have Olomouciani church, they don't have this erratic flint, and on the contrary, when they have erratic flint, they don't have Olomouciani church. It's just basic observation. I can't tell you what does it mean right now, at least, but that's it. And there is another thing, which is that the long houses tend to be excluded from the radiolarite circulation networks, and it's also even from they tend to be more focused on the local raw material and tends to be excluded for the long distance exchanges. Then you are regarding the blanks, comparing the blanks between the different houses, and you see there is still a huge variability between the different houses, where you can distinguish three groups, one with the dominance of flakes, what you can see here in blue, one with blades domination here in orange, and in the middle, something which is quite well balanced in between. So what does it mean? Does it mean that there is more local production with on those houses where there are plenty of flakes? Or is it because it's not only a blade production as we saw in Rezov? And it's probably, the answer is probably both, okay? We have, when you are looking at the tools, because the tools are indicating you what was the objective of the production, because they were searching for this kind of blades of blanks to produce the tools. So it's always a good way to look, okay, what they were looking for. And you see here that they are mostly looking for the blade. Mostly they are making the tool mostly on blades and a little bit sometimes to time on the flakes and those houses. So they are searching for blades, but sometimes you can find some small flake core. So it means that you have another kind of production. It's not only blade production, you also have some simple productions. And when you are facing some admixture like that between production, it's always more complicated to attribute the flakes to one or the other production. So you see that well, there is lots of indeterminated pieces, and I'm insisting that it's like honest and normal that you have indeterminated flakes or stuff in your assemblages. Otherwise, it's not really honest. So here, sometimes I have lots of them that I can't be able to attribute to one or the other productions. But you can see that the blade production, so is not the only production, and sometimes it's very low in some houses of T-shirted. So there is this fact, but there is also the other fact that, okay, we are, again, it's the same like techno-economic diagram, but it's just a table. So you have the beginning of the chaîne opératoire, the end. And here I noted when we have some like simple flake production here. And you can see that the structure is completely different from one raw material to the other raw material. So the napping activity is not represented here for all the raw material. From Krumlovsky-less 1, the first variety, you have everything here. So, okay, the blade production took place here, everything is okay, that's nice. But when you are looking to the other local raw material, absolutely not. you only have blades and like a little flakes from the maintenance of the chaîne opératoire. So even the local raw material doesn't seem to be napped here in some of the houses. And when you are looking at the exogenous raw material, so the situation is like, well, mostly up to you have only blades and sometimes a little bit of the flake from the maintenance, but it's quite classical. But what is strange is this phenomenon where you have the local raw material that is not napped locally. So when you are comparing one house to the other ones, and according to the chronology, here you have important differences between the first, the early phase and the recent phase here. You are looking at, okay, for the Krymlovsky-less one here, there is no fully local production in this house. So the blocks are arriving like all in the process of debitage on the site, and some are only receiving blade. And when you are looking at the Krymlovsky-less 2, there is only one house that is producing, and this is redistributed to the different houses here. And when you are looking for the recent phase, it's also the same. They are not all producing the stuff. And there is a kind of like complementarity. When one is producer here for KL2, but this is not a producer one for KL1. And you have also like in the huge house, in the big house, some are producing and some are receiving. So it seems that there is a kind of redistribution of material between the different houses. If we are going to this learning network thing, here I just took a few examples to show you the variability. The variability is really high in this site. I'm taking the exogenous raw material, the radiolarite, for example. Okay, this faceted preparation stuff is typical for the first phase. So we have one technical group here, but for another house here, it's completely different. So it's not the same mapping school who is taking in charge the production of the radiolarite here. So then we will have to see where are the production centers to compare to the production center. And I guess we will be able to distinguish different production centers later. Here you see these technically dihedral butts here. They are like really typical for the Krakow flint. So Krakow flint is another technical group here. So we have at least 3 different technical groups for the exogenous raw material. And when we are looking at the local material, but it's a little bit more complicated, but I will just focus here on one example. So it's Krymlovsky-less one. You have this faceted preparation, as I mentioned you for the radiolarite, sorry. We have exactly the same here, for example, for some houses, but this group is completely absent for the Krymlovsky-less 2. So it's not the same group learning networks that are exploiting this raw material and that are producing these different production on this raw material. If we are looking at the tools, you see here it's like almost 38% of the assemblage that are tools. This is something which is more classical than Lithic, where you have 11%. 38% is something quite classical. We have some missing activities in some houses again. For example, there is no sickle blades in this house, and some of the houses doesn't have any scrapers, and so on and so forth. So it seems again that everything is converging to suggest a form of complementarity between the households. Bon. Then I again made a statistical analysis to arrive at this dendrogram stuff, but bon, to be honest, for now, I don't know what to do with this dendrogram. Perhaps we can discuss a little bit later for those who are not good with statistics and things like that. Okay, what we see in green, we have the earliest phase. So the earliest phase are really well divided in the dendrogram, but I don't know the datation of some houses. They are indeterminated. So it's difficult to assess why they are together and why those one are together. So I don't know. But you can see that if we are like identifying the long house, they are also structuring all the clusters, like the different branches of the dendrogram. So, voilà, I don't know what to say right now, but for sure there are some connection between the different houses, and they are like exchanging lots of things. They are not like completely independent regarding the Lithic production in Tichet itself. Then I'm moving to Belgium very quickly, because the idea here is to see how Lithic can inform the transition between LBK to post-LBK. There is two occupation area in Belgium. So here you have the LBK with a high concentration in the eastern part. And here you have the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain. So, I will come back on that. So I will first focus on the western part and then to the eastern part. So you see that the LBK, the post-LBK, there is a kind of continuity between, it's a very small territory of about 25 square meters, square kilometers, sorry. And so there is a kind of continuity between the occupation, between the land use at least, and we have several sites with a dual occupation of LBK and Blicky group. Most of the sites basically have like both occupation phase. This is an excavation that we conducted, the last excavation that was conducted in this area, and it was published in October. So we published all the material from the site. And here you have the LBK occupation, and here you have the Blicky, the two houses from the Blicky group. And according to the ceramic stylistic and the decoration, Blue team work a lot on the periodization according to the stylistic here. And it seems that the houses are dated from the recent LBK here. And the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain is from the early phase of the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain. So it's the only site in the region with this LBK occupation and the Blicky occupation that are the closest one. So it was ideal to compare the difference in the Lithics with that. But what can we see? So there are huge differences between the LBK and the Blicky regarding the raw material sources and the raw material procurement. There are plenty of exogenous raw material for the LBK that are coming from the eastern region that you saw, which is full of LBK sites. They are really connected and they are exchanging a lot. So it's like 20% of the material is coming from this area. And then you have a little bit of the material from the Mons Basin, but with no specific stuff. And we have these black stones that are, I'm calling this black stone because it's different hot scraps, but it's really black, and they are making adzes with this raw material. And it's also coming from the eastern part of Belgium. When you are going to the Blicky group, they love the glenflint. They are almost only focusing the procurement on this glenflint, which is a really nice raw material from the Mons Basin. We don't have any more this SB raw material in the assemblage. No more blackstone because no more adzes. And there is a little bit more of this Bartonian material, which is coming from the Parisian basin, and that I will say a word just after. If we are going to look at the production, again, the system is completely different between the LBK, where, like in Rizov, there is exclusively a blade production exclusively. And in the Blicky group, you have the coexistence of blade and flake production with a high amount of this flake production. If again we are looking to this technical group, to this napping school, you can distinguish two napping schools in the LBK. One is definitely coming from the SB region, from the eastern part of Belgium. And there is another one, which is probably a local one. And in the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain, you have only one technical traditions, but it's another one. It's completely different to what were occurring before during the LBK. So there is a rupture in the raw material procurement, there is a rupture in the napping activity organization, and there is a rupture in the intergenerational transmission of the know-how. So there is no direct affiliation between those LBK group and the Blicky VSG nappers. We are moving to the eastern part to see if it's the same pattern, because we are also moving from the LBK to the Blicky group. But you can see that it's all the LBK, and then you have two Blicky VSG sites. So here in this area, there is a drastic reduction of the number of sites. There is a break in the occupation pattern between the LBK and the post-LBK. If you are looking at the way of doing things, so the technical tradition, so there is only one highly dominant technical tradition in this area, which you can find also in Western Belgium, and it's exclusively blade production. If you are looking at the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain, first there is again one very important difference is the simple production are here highly dominating the assemblages because it's almost 80 to 90% of some of these assemblages. When you are going to look at the technical tradition, you identify here this first way of doing things. So there is a continuity for this way of doing things, but you have a high variability of technical tradition in this area. So to simplify there, so you can see here the extension of the different technical groups that you can see during the LBK. You have this beta territory. So one of the way of doing things is extending in all the Belgian territory, and one is shared with the Parisian basin. And then during the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain, there is a restriction of the beta territory here. It's starting to be really small territory with an extension of this alpha territory. But there is a high mobility in this area during the transition where lots of different nappers coming from different ways of different learning networks are gathering here, especially with some mobility between this like Rhineland area and the eastern part of Belgium. And when you are looking at the organization of the production between the LBK and the post-LBK, it's obvious that it's completely different. We have like a blade production for the LBK, which is mostly considered as domestic. Each house is providing all the blades for the houses. And this is not anymore the case when you are moving to the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain. Instead, they are developing another strategy, which is the domestic production, like simple production with flake production. So everyone can do that. You don't need to be trained a lot to succeed to produce this kind of blanks. And in the meanwhile, you are seeing a kind of specialization of the blade production. In Belgium now, the blade production is centralized, which is like echoing a little bit what we saw during the LBK in the Czech Republic, but like not all the houses are producing the blades. Well, this, I will just arrive to that right now. So, well, I will just arrive to that, moving now to the Parisian basin and to say a few words about the circulation network. So it was also a paper published recently with my colleague Michel Kempf. So if you have some questions about the models, you will contact him. And so this is published in this recent Quaternary Environment and Human journal. Thank you for this opportunity. Alors, to say that, yeah, I stopped here. We are seeing a major innovation in the Paris basin during the Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain with the production of very long blades up to 20 centimeters on this Bartonian flint, which is really nice, brown colors, and you can see different types, but this is a really good quality raw material. And this involves a very high level of skill that is not comparable to the domestic production of small blades, which is also continuing, okay? And this Bartonian blade is considered as a cultural identity marker for this Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain. If you are excavating on how to distinguish a LBK and a post-LBK Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain site, but you will find some piece of this long Bartonian blade, and you will find some bracelets in schist bracelets. It's something that is almost systematic on this Blicky Villeneuve Saint-Germain site, except for some regions. But voilà, I will come back to that after. So the outcrops of this raw material are located here in the center of the Parisian basin, and they occur under the shape of big slabs like that. That can be really huge, until 50, 60 centimeters in length, and it can have 20 centimeter in width. There is 3 chronological stages for the BTV Saint-Germain, so one early, one middle, and one recent one. So here during this, with this paper, we worked by stages to try to compare the circulation network. Is it the same organization according to the different phase or not? There is an increase in the number of sites. You see like the first phase is a restricted area of occupation, but which is really similar to the LBK one. And suddenly they are starting to occupy the wider area and higher landscape and things like that. And you can see that Brittany was Neolithicized, can I say that? At that time. So Michel calculates the least cost path between the different sets of origin and destination. And we were we made a comparison of this least cost path and the presence and absence of tertiary Bartonian silicides. And you see that there are like important differences between the different stages. During the first stage, the supply of Bartonian silicide took place completely independently of the distance of the source. You can find Bartonian sites at some distance, like which are more far than the sites that are close to the outcrops. During the second phase, there is an extension of the occupation territory, but there is an exclusion of the farthest sites from the network. And that's why I spoiled just before, all the Brittany and so on is like excluded from the circulation network. And during stage 3, the areas where site provided Bartonian silicide seems to be a little bit reduced here compared to the second stage. Then we combined, so the chain operatoire approach, so with these techno-economic diagrams to identify, so if all the production is there, it's green, but it's only the production of short blades, okay? We have the intermediate sites, which have just a part of the chain operatoire and not all the chain operatoire. The consumer sites, which have only blades, and you have this production site of long blades, because those long blades are not produced on all the sides. And you can see here for the first stage that there is no long blade side production at that time. At least we couldn't identify it yet, and it appeared a little bit later. But we already have a kind of circulation network that is starting with, you see here, the Belgian sites that are located at 150 kilometers from the outcrops. And it seems that it's moving nappers because they have some specific skills compared to what we saw in Belgium. So they move with the blocks and not the blocks locally here. So they could come here from the N Valley or from the Oise Valley to move to the northern side. And in this area also, we can find here, it's a confluence between the Seine and the Yonne Valley. And there are sites that are not presenting any local debitage, but only blades, but it's very small blades. And it seems that we have outcrops there, but for now we have never identified traces of exploitation of these outcrops. But we are wondering if this small patch of circulation here could be not an autonomous system based on local resource, because the system is different from what we are seeing in the center of the Parisian basin. During stage 2, so you are like really seeing that everything is excluded here from the network. We have two long blade production centers, one in the N Valley here, and one in the Marne Valley that you can see here. And so it seems, according to the model, that the N Valley emerged as the primary supplier along the preferential axis here, the northeastern road, leading to northern France and Belgium. And there is a significance of the intermediate site that you can see. The cross, they are not very visible on the map, sorry for that. So it seems that now the intermediate sites have an importance in the regional distribution of this blade. And you can see that there is a new road that emerged here toward like Normandy following the Seine River. And here you have only blades circulating here in this corridor. So according to the model, both pathway, I mean like this, the Marne Valley or the Oise Valley can provide this movement corridor, and they could share this structure, redistribution structure that can fit the down the line model of redistribution. Regarding the stage 3, the organization exhibits here a very unique pattern compared to the previous stages. You can see that looking outside this densely interconnected cluster here, it's only blades that are circulating now, no more intermediary sites and things like that, but we have plenty of intermediary sites that are gathered here in the center of the Parisian basin. So we are interpreting this fact with, it seems that some of the sites have no more a direct access to the resources, and they are dependent on the producer side to receive the Bartonian flint, but even in this area where the outcrops are located. So it suggests an increased interdependence among the sites like within this area. That seems for us to indicate an increased resource control by the production center. So we can identify like distinct pattern between the first, the second, and the last stage. So we can like demonstrate that how it evolved and how the social, economic, and cultural dynamics are very diverse according to the timeline. We would like later to use this model to like test the different hypotheses with what we get with different raw materials. And I'm especially thinking in these bracelets projections because they are considered for a long time as the reciprocity stuff. Like, okay, I'm giving you a Bartonian blade and I will give you a shale bracelet. But it has to be demonstrated, and we can combine this approach with different material. And we also have to consider the circulation of this Polish axis produced with alpine resources because it's starting also at that time. So the idea is also to have other exchange network in the models to try to see how it works. So I'm just arriving at the end, and this presentation was really spotted on some example to try to show you what we can say with the lithics, you know, and that they can be like nice insights to understand and to describe Neolithic societies. Alors, we need to combine fine-grained studies with large-scale models to build this comprehensive and dynamic understanding of past human trajectories, but something, again, which is really highly time-consuming, spending time studying these small lithics. And when I was working, Michael Kempf, who is like modeling in front of this computer, he was always saying, why are you so long? Why are you so long? Like, so it takes time to study, it takes time to deal with the data, so it's not really easy to present stuff and to follow like the science with a very demanding producing of papers and so on and so forth. So thank you for your attention. Děkuji moc za pozornost. If you have any questions.